Assalamu alaikum, Khawateen wa Hazrat. Waseem Ahsan welcomes you to lecture number 40 of Marketing for Nonprofits, MKT728, at the Virtual University of Pakistan. The topic of learning at the moment is going to be building cause-marketing relationships. We already have looked into the fundamentals and all the important components of cause marketing. And now is the time that we talk about how to build these relationships, which happen to be very significant and also very sensitive. The fact of the matter is that cause marketing relationships are many steps further from traditional charity or philanthropy, so to say. We have to take a very strategic standpoint of the whole relationship because it is a question of two good organizations getting together, putting in their assets and resources and aligning their goals and objectives in order to arrive at certain mutual beneficial situation. And therefore, it takes a lot of strategic thinking. Again, the fact is that we already have looked into all the elements of strategic marketing management, and therefore, it is a combination of all those factors which come into play when we consider joining hands with a commercial entity in order to have a cause relationship. So in other words, it takes a lot of strategic working before a brand from the commercial side and a program from the nonprofit side are going to come together and position themselves in such a way that the outcome of the relationship is mutually beneficial. So in other words, the commercial entity looks for certain commercial benefits while also trying to prove at the same time that they happen to be very important and credible corporate citizens, and they really care about the community and community's betterment, while at the same time, nonprofit organization also stands to gain because they have made investments into their programs, and when programs are carried out in conjunction with a commercial brand which is credible and which has a following and has a huge commercial customer base, then the NPO program also stands to gain. There are the four important components to this kind of relation building. The one is that we have to have orientation for cause marketing. Without this orientation, there is no way that the two organizations can come together and look at each other's perspectives in a unified kind of a way, or in a way which does not differ from each other's. They have to take the same perspective. They have to be marketing oriented, and they have to understand each other's objectives and goals. They have to understand the positioning of each other's the products or each other's brands, which happens to be a physical product in case of the commercial entity and a program in terms of a nonprofit organization. So once we have that the orientation, we then build the cost marketing programs. Once we have the programs in place, we implement those programs. And it goes without saying that once implementation takes place, we look for the results that we had envisioned while we embarked upon a cost marketing relationship. So in other words, both the organizations have got to be extremely careful and sensitive to the fact that this happens to be a very strategic consideration, and therefore they should be sensitive in choosing the right product, or for that matter, the brand on the commercial side, and the right program on the nonprofit side. So what I'm saying is that the nonprofit has to be sensitive to the commercial brand the NPO is going to be partnering with, and the commercial entity has to be very careful about choosing the right program which has a strategic fit with the kind of product that they are selling in the marketplace. And having this kind of an understanding we then get onto the fundamentals of developing the marketing orientation for a cause marketing relationship. What really are the basics of developing this kind of orientation again stem from the concepts of commercial marketing. And the fact is that we've got to be very clear about the positioning of our program. Unless we have a very distinct position of the program, there is no way that the commercial entity is going to be in a position to understand and appreciate aligning their brand or product with that of the nonprofit. So the first and the foremost thing is having a very clear and distinct positioning of the nonprofit program. And we cannot really have this kind of an orientation unless we happen to be an organization fully appreciative of the components of internal as well as external marketing. When I talk about internal marketing, I think we are all on the same page that it refers to all the people working for the organization as well as all those stakeholders who are in close contact with the organization, in particular in case of a nonprofit organization which has so many stakeholders. So it basically is a question of all these people being on the same page and being at a point where they buy into with all that is taking place in terms of the marketing initiatives in relation to developing a cause relationship. And then they also have to be very sensitive to the components of external marketing, which we all know is a function of the marketing mix, meaning all the variables of marketing mix that have to be put together in order to come up with a good, effective marketing campaign. So the foremost thing is a marketing orientation in terms of internal marketing and also external marketing. We have to understand that cost marketing relationships are driven by business objectives. Although corporations are out to prove that they are socially responsible citizens and they do want betterment of the communities they operate within, but then the fact remains they also have to look after the interests of their businesses. In other words, they are very sensitive to growing their businesses and improving on all the fundamentals of the marketing management, because that's something which gives strength to their overall business. So once we have that kind of understanding, we really can align our interests and our position as a nonprofit organization with that of a commercial enterprise. And therefore, I will go on to say that a nonprofit organization has to be knowledgeable of the business terminologies like ROI, return on investment, and things like the marketing share and the differentiation, the market expansion, and the positioning concept, and so on and so forth. Because that is something which is going to make sure that we can align our strategic thinking and we can find a collaborative fit which is mutually beneficial for the two organizations. Having this kind of an understanding, we can, of course, go for a very explicit positioning of our own program. And like I said earlier, this is extremely important because this really facilitates the commercial entity to understand our program, meaning our product, in turn meaning our brand, and then aligning his brand with ours. And for that, we as a nonprofit organization have to be very sensitive to not just the positioning of the organization, but rather we should get into the specifics of the program that we are talking about in terms of developing that the cause brand. And cause brand is the brand which gets into relationship with a commercial brand in order to develop a cause marketing relationship. So in other words, we at the NPO side have to be very sensitive to developing the right positioning for the program, which happens to be our product, so that we can join hands with the commercial brand as effectively as possible. I think we all know that a very concise positioning for a brand is something which is the pivot of all the strategies that flow out of that particular pivotal point. And therefore, the importance of positioning is something that I'm going to rub in again and again. We also know that it is the credibility of a particular brand which wins the minds of the target audience. So, in other words, it is something which helps in changing the behavior of the target audience. And the fact of the matter is that a brand has to be so much credible that it goes beyond that certain point and should win over their hearts in order to make that behavioral change permanent. If not permanent, it must stay there for a long time to come. And that's where the concept of brand loyalty on the commercial side comes in. So, in other words, if we have a very concise, distinct, and good positioning for our brand, it is going to help us change the behaviors of our target audience. And it is going to go beyond that in order to win over their minds so that they can really give a sense of permanence to their behavior. And once it is done, then you see the two brands or the two parties can reach a point where in very particular positioning context that we can say that they can create an emotional level where the organizations can succeed in making the behaviors of the respective target audiences rather permanent and very strong, so that the target audiences do every time they think of buying that certain brand, they shouldn't really think of anything else. And having said that, I will go on to say, after being very clear about developing the positioning for the program that is going to be the cause brand in this particular relationship, and having taken care of the positioning dynamics, we then have to get on with another thing, that is taking stock of the assets and resources of the two respective organizations. The nonprofit organization has to bring forward its own assets and resources, whereas the commercial entity has to put forward theirs, because it is a lot of the physical resources in terms of so many aspects of the supply chain, the human resources, the financial resources, and so many other kinds of resources which all form the stretch of the strategic intent, which I did talk about in detail in one of the earlier lectures. So, in other words, all the capabilities that are at the disposal of an organization, whether that is a commercial organization or happens to be a nonprofit organization, all those resources and capabilities have to be brought forward so that the interplay of those resources can lead us toward achieving what we are out to achieve with the help of the cause relationship. So, in other words, what I'm saying is that the nonprofit organization has its staff, its the program, and promotional events, and there's so many kinds of marketing campaigns that the nonprofit keeps undertaking from time to time as the part of its assets. And these are the kind of assets which should be appreciated by the nonprofit itself. The reason I'm making this statement is that in many a case, nonprofit organizations are not really appreciative of their own assets. They think they are short of assets, and they do not really have a match with their partners who happen to be a huge commercial entity. It could be a multinational corporation. And given all those the facts and figures, nonprofit organizations in many situations happen to get into kind of a complex, which must not be the case once you have started considering getting into a cost marketing relationship. The fact is that this is a relationship based on equality. If not equality in terms of financials, in terms of the strategic intent, both the organizations have to look at their strategic perspectives, and both are to be appreciated. The fact is, both happen to be very comprehensive, and they take in their fold. There's so many different elements of respective contribution that can make the difference in terms of the future of both the organizations. So, in other words, nonprofit organizations must never underestimate themselves in terms of their assets and resources. What are the kind of assets and resources that they have at their disposal? I did touch upon that. And if I give you an organized and structured kind of an account of those resources and assets, then let me take a start from the factor of the brand name, the logo, and the goodwill or the reputation of the nonprofit organization. I think you will agree with me. This really goes without saying that a nonprofit organization generally has a very high level of credibility and respect in the marketplace. And I would rather say, among the community members or among, you see, a broader community at a regional level, at a national level. And the fact is, there are the nonprofit organizations that enjoy their credibility internationally. Red Cross, for example. So there are so many different examples. What I'm saying is that the credibility and trust which the nonprofit organization has, any nonprofit organization may have, is something that basically stems from the brand name, the logo, and the reputation. And again, the fact is that the brand name and the logo do not happen to be just graphics on the paper. They happen to be something behind which there's a lot of history. And I would say that this history basically stems from the concept of the brand raising, the important components of which we have learned through the course. And I would touch upon very, very significant components of brand raising, but just in a couple of seconds. Let me say before that, the higher the credibility and trust of a nonprofit, the program or a brand, the higher is the value it carries with itself. And higher is the level of respect in the eyes of the people. And in turn, the commercial brand, which is partnering with a nonprofit brand, also stands to gain out of that credibility and trust. I think this is so important that we can say if there were no the social programs, that there would be no credibility and trust, which can be beneficial for a for-profit brand or for a commercial brand which happens to be a partner of a nonprofit brand. So I'm not saying that without a nonprofit program, a commercial brand cannot have the respect or credibility in the marketplace. Well, the fact is there are so many commercial brands which have a very strong following of customers and enjoy a very high level of loyalty. What I'm saying is not every brand is like a very strong brand. And even a strong brand can be made stronger once it is in a position to prove it is a responsible social citizen or a corporate citizen. And the social responsibility is something which has become the need of the hour on part of so many huge corporations. And the history of that. And without getting into details, how the whole thing started off, which we already know, the fact remains that the commercial brand stands to gain a lot out of the reputation, credibility, and respect for a nonprofit brand. And I would again say that if there were no programs, there would be no relationships. And if there would be no cost marketing relationships, things would be different. I will add here that this happens to be something mutually beneficial. And that's something in which I've been talking about ever since I started talking about cost marketing and cost marketing relationships. But what I'm trying to emphasize here is the point that nonprofit organizations must never underestimate their resources and their assets. They have a lot of value which they may find kind of invisible because it is an intangible. It does not really happen in a tangible form. And nonprofit managers and workers and all stakeholders can really realize the value of their programs, because once they start talking with the commercial organizations that are so eager to get into a cost marketing relationship. But again, the fact is they will not be eager to get into that kind of a relationship if the nonprofit organization, meaning you, do not really have the right kind of positioning, if you do not have the right kind of marketing orientation, not just the marketing orientation in general, but in specifics in terms of internal marketing and also external marketing. And this is something which that takes us back to the concept of brand raising. And that's what I indicated just a few moments ago. I think if we take a good look in a very broad form and manner at the concept of brand raising, that we will realize that this basically happens to be a process whereby nonprofit organizations can gain the visibility, because this is the process that facilitates nonprofit organizations to gain identity. And with the help of that identity, coupled with very specific communications systems, the nonprofit organizations are in a position to express more effectively their goals and objectives and also their missions. So brand raising is all about gaining, first generating, and then sustaining that identity which you create with the help of the three levels that I did talk about in a lot of detail. I think it really transcended into a series of lectures. However, that's not the point I want to make here. My point is that once you are sensitive to the concept of brand raising, and you do take into consideration the three levels, which start with the organizational level and then goes on to the identity level and messaging, and then to the experiential level, where you put together all the tools and channels that help you talk with your the target audience, or in other words, which really helps your target audiences to connect with your organization and then actuate them into taking certain actions and displaying certain specific behaviors which help you achieve the mission, is something which is a function of experiential level of the brand raising exercise. Just a couple of things which I would like to emphasize in terms of this organizational level, which happens to be the first and the foremost level of brand raising, because the whole thing starts from there. If we are not really mindful of the organizational level, we are not going to have a very good identity level, or for that matter, a good and effective experiential level. We start with the vision statement, and that is something which has to be shared by all in the organization. I can tell you with a lot of confidence, there are non-profit organizations that do not seem to think that the vision is something which really needs to be shared among almost everybody within the organization. Because until you do that, you cannot really look into the future very effectively, even if you are in a position to look into the future effectively as the top managers or as very important, significant shareholders of the organization. You are not in a position to take into confidence all the people and those stakeholders who are going to work very actively for the organization for the achievement of the mission. You're not going to be talking about, we keep talking about so frequently in the context of this particular course. So therefore, the vision is extremely important, flows out of which the mission for the organization. And we know that we've got to be very clear about the purpose of the organization. We must be very explicit about the set of operations that we are a part of and for which we exist, and which really helps us achieve the mission. And once we have the mission in place, we talk about certain values, because when we work in order to execute the certain procedures which have been set in place for the organization to work on, we are basically working to achieve the mission. And we cannot achieve the mission effectively unless it is a function of all those values which we harbor very close to our chest and which we really believe in as not just the top managers, but also workers at various levels of the organization. And we, having had good values, we then get down to objectives and different kinds of goals. We look into external environment, impact of that environment on our capabilities, and our capabilities and competences are a function of the strategic intent. And once we have the strategic intent in place and we are clear about that, which happens to be something extremely internal to the organization, we again go back to the mission, which happens to have an external focus. And with that external focus, we start implementing our programs. And we implement our programs with the help of very distinct and the very specific kind of positioning for those programs, or for each program that we work on. There are organizations that work on just one program, so the positioning for the program is the positioning for the organization. However, if the organization is working in so many different directions in order to bring about certain the social goods to the community and to the society, then we have to have different positionings for different programs. And again, I would say that we have to be clear about which program is just about the rightmost program to have that rightmost collaborative fit, which is going to give a strategic advantage to both the parties, meaning the nonprofit organization as well as the commercial entity. So the concept of the brand raising, as you have seen, is extremely important, because unless we get into the brand raising exercise, or in other words, the practice of brand raising, we're not going to have the right positioning for our program, or for that matter, for our organization. And we cannot really have a good commercial partner. I would say with confidence, I can make the statement that no commercial partner is going to be attracted toward a program or toward a nonprofit organization that does not have that kind of marketing orientation, and that may not have a very clear and explicit positioning for the program it wants to partner with a commercial entity. Because the fact is that the commercial entity cannot align its objectives and goals and its strategies with those of yours, because you do not seem to demonstrate and portray the right positioning. You are ambivalent and you are not really clear about the positioning of your product, which means you have not taken into consideration different variables of the marketing mix, which means you do not really seem to have the right values, and which certainly is a reflection of a poor the mission statement. And even if the mission statement happens to be a good sounding one and a good a statement that sounds to be effective, something has gone wrong somewhere, because you have not been in a position to carve out the right positioning for your brand. And therefore, the commercial partner is not going to be attracted. So back to the fundamental that the nonprofit organizations do have certain resources which happen to be a great strength of theirs. They may not realize that until the time they develop that kind of the commercial mindset. And the commercials, having a commercial mindset is not something negative. That doesn't really mean that you really want to be very commercial while running a nonprofit organization. That is a must, because you have to be able to look at the objectives, goals, and all the I would say strategic the milestones that the commercial organization may have set to itself, because until you have the capability of carrying out a critical critique of the strategic formulation of the commercial entity's brand and its programs, the marketing and operational programs for that particular brand, there is just no way that you can be partners. And therefore, it is extremely important first to be aware of, or rather, to be knowledgeable and sensitive about the strength that you have. You must not undermine, you must not underestimate the strength that you have. And then you should be in a position to professionally put together all the elements of internal and external marketing so that you can make the most of it when it comes to the joining hands with the commercial partner. Now, the next thing that we need to have good awareness of, that we have as part of our strength, meaning we as nonprofit sector, which we call community connections. We are connected with the community members at all levels. We know the community leaders, we know an average person within the community, and we know that we have done something good for the community. And when we realize that the community members also appreciate what the nonprofit has done for them or is in the process of doing, for which they are willing to change their behaviors, or they already have changed their behaviors in order to be attracted toward the program which you have put in place, then that is another strength, because you can be a very good link between the community and the commercial brand. Now, this commercial brand may have a very strong following. The fact is, when people start realizing that the commercial brand is related with a very noble cause, then the level of usage and the repeat purchases go at a very high pitch. If not at a very high pitch, say at a higher pitch. And I did mention to you the numbers which have been derived as a result of structured marketing research in the US market, how the people really are attracted toward a certain tangible brand offered by a commercial organization which happens to partner with a good cause. And this goes without saying. The noble cause has to be a very credible cause, and you make the noble cause the more credible with the help of your marketing orientation. You can introduce the commercial partner to not just community members, but you also can be linked between the commercial partner and governmental agencies, with the international agencies. If you happen to be a nonprofit that is connected with some international organization, it could be United Nations, could be any agency of the United Nations. All I'm saying is that you really can become a very important link between the commercial partner and the stakeholders who happen to be a part of the community. You also can facilitate commercial partners working with the government, if they happen to need governmental support, which they do need, from time to time. So this is another strength of the nonprofit organizations, which should not be underestimated. Public relations and the media connections happens to be another factor that should not be underestimated, and that should be kept in the forefront when a nonprofit organization considers a partnership with the commercial entity. Because without exaggerating, the nonprofit organization does have a very effective relationship with the media, and the media people are convinced about the nobleness of the cause, and they are the ones who offer, if not free advertising time to nonprofit organizations, certainly they do offer coverage to a noble cause, which becomes the basis of a very good link and connection between the commercial partner and the media. And this might lead to things like the discounts on part of the commercial campaigns run by the commercial partner, because media do understands that the commercial partner has joined hands with a noble nonprofit cause. And having done that, the commercial partner certainly is going to do something good for the society they do care about the community, and with that, they should be helped. And that can be beneficial for the commercial partner. So this is yet another strength which the nonprofit organization or rather organizations they do carry. And then, the NPOs could have their websites, and all kinds of communications at the experiential level that are part of the online channels. And when we, as nonprofit people, start communicating different stories online, we are bound to talk about our commercial partners and their brand because we are into a partnership. And we talk about their brand not for the love of it, but for the simple reason and fact that that happens to be a partner brand. And with the help of that particular brand, we are facilitating ourselves in terms of generating more revenues. And when we generate more revenues with the help of that relationship, which spans over a certain specified predetermined amount of time, could be like 3 months, could be 6 months, so on and so forth, depending on the situation, depending on the circumstances and the strategic objectives of both the organizations. But the fact here is that there's a lot just which can be done with the help of communication channels which are at the disposal of the nonprofit organization, which is a partner in this kind of a relationship. And a couple of things that we have to keep in mind while we have considered all these the points I've talked about in terms of having the marketing orientation, or in terms of developing that kind of orientation, or even if we do have that orientation, all the fundamentals and their importance and the interplay of all those factors in terms of presenting yourselves as a credible, strong, equal partner at par with the commercial entity. So you have to keep a couple of things in mind while you exercise all that. And these are the couple of things which I'm going to talk about in the context of planning for developing this kind of cause relationship. So what is it that we have to keep in mind when we start considering this kind of a partnership? We have to keep in mind in the first place two things: that where there are benefits and advantages of having a cost marketing relationship, there are also the disadvantages and costs. So in other words, if we have the benefits on the one hand, we have risks on the other hand. So we've got to be very careful while we start considering entering a cause relationship. And we have to look at ourselves in the first place. We have to carry out introspection, meaning self-examination of our own capabilities and our own resources, and then arrive at the conclusion whether or not we really should get into this kind of a relationship. Once we are convinced that we should, then we have to take a very close look at our partner, because once we have gotten into the relationship, there is no going back, because that leaves a very bad taste in the mouth. It leads to having negative reputation in the marketplace, and it reflects on both the partners. So before getting into the relationship, a nonprofit organization has to take a very close look at so many different dimensions of the commercial organization, so that it can satisfy itself, and it can have certain measures and benchmarks which are extremely important for the commercial entity to be at before the nonprofit organization enters that particular relationship. So before you sign on the dotted line, you've got to look into so many different things. There are no omissions, pardonable later on. Those only can be regretted later on. And therefore, what I'm saying is we have to look into the situation beforehand, and in order to make sure that there are no glaring omissions and that there is going to be total alignment between our objectives and goals and theirs, that we have to have a checklist of so many different things that we have to look into. And that checklist must be the responsibility of the person responsible for the program. And, we have to keep one thing in mind, that there has to be the one person responsible for this relationship on the nonprofit side, and similarly on the commercial side. Now, this person responsible for such an important exercise has to be either the chief executive of the organization or the marketing manager at least, because they are the people who understand not just marketing, but also the overall operations of the organization. And unless they have an understanding of the total operations of their own organization, they cannot handle the partnership. And not just that, they also have to have the ability and capability to look at the objectives and goals and strategic perspectives for the commercial entity, because only then they can carry out the critical critique that I mentioned a little while earlier. Because without that ability to undertake that critique, they cannot make the rightmost decision. And they should be responsible for a certain well laid out process, and they have to have a checklist which has to be fulfilled, and which has to be the thing or the tool giving the full satisfaction to the nonprofit organization that they have looked into all the relevant dimensions before they take the final decision to get into the partnership. And I would like to say that they have to have a very comprehensive risk assessment management system, of which the checklist I talked about has to be a part. So in other words, there are certain questions that we have to answer to ourselves, and these questions are going to make sure that while we are in a position to derive the benefit out of the relationship, we also should be in a position to ward off the certain threats and certain risks that are there. So the questions that we have to answer are like the following. A question could be like, is there going to be a strategic fit or a complete strategic alignment between our objectives and theirs? Now, this is something that I've talked in detail by giving you the different dimensions of the marketing orientation for cost marketing relationships. And we look into things like to what extent this the partner is going to offer us an opportunity, whereas we can increase our revenues. And if we do increase our revenues, what really are the costs that we have to pay? And do the additional the revenues justify the additional costs? And ideally, the additional revenues should far outweigh the costs that we as a nonprofit incur as our contribution toward the program. And you know very well that these costs could take so many different shapes. We incur these costs, in terms of taking certain marketing initiatives and all related activities to the partnership. And then we have to look into things like, do we really have the resources, meaning the human resources and the financial resources? If the answer is yes, only then we should go forward. Otherwise, we should be very introspective about getting into this kind of relationship, meaning that we should shy away from the relationship. We should also look into things like to what extent we may have access to certain specialists, because we will be needing advice from the outside in order to implement the program. And we should be needing the help of, for example, scientists. If we happen to be a nonprofit organization working in the area of environment, for example, we need the help of attorneys and the doctors in particular, if we are working in the area of healthcare. And therefore, all kinds of external help that we may need, we have to look into. Are we in a position to have that kind of help? If the answer is yes, we should go forward. And we have to look into things like to what extent this relationship is going to offer us a very strong base among the additional the donors and the volunteers, so to say, because the commercial partner has its own following, meaning his brand has its own following. And there are certain members of the community who have not thought of the nonprofit program so far. And once this partnership takes place and it is in the process of implementation, then the community members who were not close to the nonprofit organization may start thinking in terms of always buying that commercial brand because they're convinced their help toward the cause is going to be more important than just buying the brand. So if the nonprofit thinks that this is an advantage or a benefit which can fall its way and with no risks and with no additional disadvantages, then the nonprofit organization should really go forward. And the nonprofit should also look into things like what kind of reputation the corporate entity has. If it doesn't really have the good reputation in the marketplace, then I think the nonprofit should shy away because the reflection of the commercial entities, the management style and its governance is something which cannot be ignored. And that reflection will have a negative impact on the reputation of the nonprofit as well. And the reputation and the goodwill, the factor that I talked in so much detail moments ago is something which must not be undermined. So these are some of the questions that we have to take into the consideration before we move forward. The list is not exhaustive. I have given you just about a few questions in order to evoke your imagination as to what really can be the dimensions and the questions which you should ask yourself in order to satisfy yourself that you are getting into partnership with the right company. It all depends on the situation which will prevail when you are part of a nonprofit wanting to get into a cause relationship with a commercial entity. So it is the practicality of the situation which is the function of all those questions that you should form and put together in order to come up with the right checklist before you can satisfy yourselves that the alignment between their objectives and goals and yours is going to be a real collaborative fit that the two partners are looking for. And then you see that you also have to look into the value base of the two organizations. That is something I did touch upon a little earlier. But if our values are at odds and they work at cross purposes, there is no sense in going ahead with the kind of relationship that we are considering, because the commercial enterprise is not worth its salt, and it is an organization that may become kind of a liability for the nonprofit organization. So the NPO should be better off not getting into the relationship. This is an extreme possibility, meaning a remote possibility I'm talking about. But the reason I'm talking about all this is that we as nonprofit managers have got to be very sensitive to all these the dimensions, because these are the kind of things that we have to take into consideration in a preemptive way. And it is part of the planning that we undertake and carry out before we get into the actual relationship, because actual relationship is the execution, which again is the very important part. And the fact is that execution could be even more important than the planning itself, because if you take wrong steps while you execute the plan, you mess up the plan. And the plan goes out the window, which means, the organization, or rather the cause relationship, does not get off the ground. So any wrong move on part of either of the partners is not going to be good for any one of them. So in order for the two partners to make the strategic partnership, I said strategic partnership very fruitful, they have to take into consideration all the vital factors which affect both the organizations. And while doing that, they have to consider each other at par, and they have to believe in the concept of mutual respect and transparency. Thanks.